Welcome to the IETF112-NETMOD session. I'm Lou Berger. Here with my co-chair, Kent Watson. We also have a third co-chair who I think may be trying to join. The material that we'll be going over today is all uploaded on Data Tracker, and we are using the note-taking tool, which today I think is called HedgeDoc. It'll change tomorrow, but we're using the note-taker tool. The link is here. It's also in the chat session. We ask everyone to please jump on and help us capture everything that's said during discussion time. We don't have to capture what the presenter is saying. That's on the slides. Excuse me. We're well into the IETF this week, so I think folks will be fairly familiar with our Note Well. We have a set of documents, BCPs, that govern how we interact, how we operate. That covers both technology disclosures, patents, IPR, as well as code of conduct. Please keep in mind that everything we say and do here becomes part of our public record. We are recording this session, and this session will be made available via YouTube as well as other IETF means. One of these BCPs is our conduct guidelines. It's BCP 54. We've been asked by our leadership to highlight this, and this has always been there, BCP 54, but there's been some recent discussions, and they think it's very important to ensure that we keep our interactions very respectful and courteous and collegiate. Even if we're having heated discussions, which is also just fine to have discussions which you are maybe a little passionate about, but please keep it technical and always respectful. We're using Meet.echo. If you are listening, you have found us. And as I mentioned, we're going to make a video recording of this, so you might be seeing this on video. The note-taking we've mentioned before is the collaborative. I've seen one person join since I asked others to join. We have, please take a look and click on the chat button, go to the top and click on the note-taking page and help us capture the discussion. It's really important that we capture actions and a good discussion.
Just quickly add also the link at the very top of the Meet.echo window, the fourth icon from the left on the top right corner takes you to the note-taking tool as well.
Thank you. And that was Kent, for those of you that don't know. The agenda is basically as published. We've had I think we had a speaker update and some versions update, but the agenda is largely unchanged. Again, all the material is posted. We think the session is going to run so tight that we're not going to get to the last slot. This slot is actually coming to us from a CCAMP document. And I think the main question really there was, which working group does this belong in? And generally, we follow the practice in NETMOD as if there is another working group that has expertise on the material being covered by the model, it should be done in that working group. So we would expect this to continue in this work to continue in CCAMP as is indicated by the draft name. We have not had any RFCs published since the last time we met, but we do have some items in the RFC editor queue. I don't think there was anything particularly noteworthy there to talk about. I'll defer to Kent if he wants to jump in with anything, but I don't think there was anything really noteworthy there. The post last call documents, we have a couple that are expired. The authors have committed to doing the update, so these aren't dead even though they're expired, so we'll keep an eye on that. We do have one document that was returned to the working group. Basically, there was some alignment necessary to reference documents. The action for that sits with the authors, and we really are hoping that the authors take initiative there. If they don't, if there's others who wish to help out, I would suggest that they contact the authors as well as CC the NetMod chairs, and we can discuss that. We have several documents not on the agenda. Node tags hasn't been modified in a while. There has been an update on the list a couple of times, so we're really looking for an update there. The next one, the BIS, there was some recent good discussion about whether to take that to last call as is or wait for additional changes. We think that it would be fine to move this forward if there isn't something immediate that has been identified by the working group that should be added. So please take a look at this document. If you think you have something you want to add to it, please propose it on the list. If we don't see anything, probably sometime in December, we'll take it to last call. Versioning requirements, that document is pretty well complete. We're just waiting for the other versioning work to advance it. We haven't had any recent incoming or outgoing liaisons proposed. If you think you have one that is important, please let us know. And the best way to do that is on the list. That's sort of the first point here is utilize the list. That's where we do consensus. These discussions are good. The interims are good. They're very important for helping us make progress. But decision making happens on the list. This is particularly important where you have to keep in mind when you have an active set of authors that are actively discussing changes. They may agree to a set of changes, but if it's a working group document, the acceptance of those changes is governed by the working group, not the authors. So it's great to have that progress, but the discussion has to be reflected on the list, and we have to get buy-in from the working group there. We continue to support and offer informal meetings that we can, the chairs can support that through scheduling working group WebExes. We also can have virtual interims like we did last month. And all that takes, again, is a request to the authors. A request from to the chairs. With that, we're going to move to the next presentation. I believe that's Balazs. Balazs, up on the top, there should be a share preloaded slide button. If you could click that, you should be able to find your slides and present.
Okay.
I think you were down at the bottom, listed as 02. I don't know. We can't reorder, but they're numbered. They are numbered.
Yes.
My screen says a new deck is being shared, but I don't. Oh, there it is.
Here we go. Great. Thank you.
Okay.
We see it. Let's go.
So hello, everyone. Balazs Lengyel. I'm speaking on behalf of the active authors of the NetMod versioning group on the versioning agenda. I will present a short overview of what we are doing, and then we'll put more time into what's happening into Yank packages. We are still having weekly meetings, and which are open to everyone. There are quite a good participation for multiple companies, and if you're interested, then yeah, you are also welcome. What we are doing these days is we have the first two drafts, the module versioning and the Yank Semver drafts. We try to finish that and push them to workgroup last call. And then we are, beside this, we are also working on the package drafts. Package draft. There are a number of open issues. We have an issue tracker on the IETF website. We are trying to close that and resolve all the issues. So what updates we have been doing? We had are at -05 at this point. That was released last days. For the module versioning, basically it's editorial updates and adding a few small statements, correcting some of the examples, and so that nothing new, major functional happened here. For the stemware, which defines our versioning and labeling method, we have a bit more work. We had full reviews by the authors, corrected everything we found. We defined how this is usable for submodules. The text previously only referred to modules. We changed the prefix to make it shorter and unique in our Yang module. And then there were a number of editorial changes. Yeah. For submodules, the basic statement is that they can be versioned using Yang semantic versioning. If you change the submodule and you change the semantic versioning of the submodule, then you also have to change the module's semantic version, similar as what we have with revision information dates. So if you change the submodule, then that means the module is also changed. Next steps, what we are still working on. We have the tracker for the first two modules, module versioning and semantic versioning. The issues are closed. We believe we found a solution for every of those issues. And the authors believe that these two first drafts are ready for workgroup last call. So we call on the chairs to decide, please. And we are focusing on the packages draft with a number of issues, and number of people are contributing text, and we'll have a bit more presentation on what is happening there. And with that, I'm open to questions, or I would hand over to my colleagues to speak about what's happening in packages.
Not a question, but a comment. Just as a recap, the plan for the working group is that we will take these first few drafts to working group last call, but then the chairs will hold them within the working group until the entire set, all 5 drafts, are last called, and at which point we'll take them to the IESG.
Yes. And besides the meeting, as the chair said, we try to get all issues also to the mailing list, and I hope we did it correctly.
I see that Bo has a question or a comment. Go ahead, Bo.
Oh, I don't have comments on this. I'm just preparing for the next.
I think she's just the next speaker.
Yeah.
Well, with that, maybe move on to the next presentation.
Thank you.
Bo, are you able to share your own slides?
I'm trying.
Okay, yeah, I see a new document.
Share.
Perfect. There you go.
Can you see? But right now seems
I see them.
Cannot. Yeah, it's good. Hello everyone. This is Bo Wu, and as just Blash mentioned, I'm going to present Yang packages draft status on behalf of all the authors and the versioning NetMod versioning team. Since last revision, we don't do very major changes, but we try to remove the package checksum definition, since module versioning draft has removed all the module versioning module checksum, and packages draft needs to keep consistent with all these checksum issues. So that's the only changes we do to this revision. Regarding all the other open issues right now, we still have 20 open issues. And Blush also mentioned that all these issues, most issues has been assigned owners. So the contributors and working on that and to move it forward. And here we list the 3 issues where we are under discussion in the weekly meeting, and I'll took it each on this. And about issue 65, this is a quite typical one that in the open issues, that we need to refine the text, and since Yang versioning draft has been stable, and so this draft need to be made the changes. This one is the previous version Yang packages definition just use same word label, but we don't have similar label scheme. So so right now we are Blush are working on this and to propose a text on it. And about some new function of these Yang packages is schema mount. Right now, in this revision, Yang packages doesn't define schema mount functions. So the question is, the authors think the packages can contain modules with module points. So packages can give some constraints on the mount point. So for example, for IETF basic package, it may mount layer 2 VPN or layer 3 VPN packages. So for Yang packages, then in the on the mount points, we can list some constraints, whether maybe only layer 3 VPN is allowable package. So to this issue, we think we will update to include the mount point information and define some constraints for mounted schema. Here we list some rules on this, like some package X can constraints the instance of mount point to restrict only layer 2 VPN or layer 3 VPN to be mounted. And schema mounts listed in packet can be override of mounts in the included package. And the rule number 3 will be a list of allowable packages must include all allowable packages from included packages. These rules are initial text we are proposing to add to Yang packages in the next revision. And one major issue is that right now Yang packages also define a module list. But Yang proposed this issue that he has some concerns on there are already 4 mechanisms standardized by IETF. They are hello message, netconf monitoring, Young library, 7950 mandates in 1.1 is that Young library is mandatory. And so module list is already there. And also we have 8342 NMDA Young library. So Young package will be the 5th mechanism to list the set of modules. And so right now, Yan is working on this to try to propose some way to remove this duplication. So right now, the team are working on this issue, but we need to further discuss in the weekly meeting, and then when the authors think it's ready, then we'll bring back to the working group for further discussion. So that's almost the status and progress we made, and also the key issues. So next step, the team are working on the open issues and try to make more progress on this. So that's the end of my presentation. Thanks. Any questions and comments?
Thank you for the hard work and progress update. As a reminder to the working group, anyone is welcome to participate in it. It's a working group activity. It's not an author's activity. So
Yes.
it's open to all. And if you could just try to repost or post what you think weekly issues that are going to be discussed. That'll help help people to identify when they should show up to these meetings. It's a request. It's not a, if you don't do it, we can live with it, but it'd be nice just to give warning of what issues you're going to talk about each week, just so that if someone's interested in a particular issue, they can show. Thank you for the work, and also thank you both for ending early and keeping us on schedule.
Indeed, thank you. And next presentation is Qifeng. And if you're able to share your own slides, that'd be wonderful.
Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay. So hello, everyone. This is Qifeng. On behalf of the authors and contributors, I would like to give a presentation about system-defined configuration. As you can see, it's a 0.0 version draft, but not really a new work. Actually, it has already been presented in NetConf and NetMod working groups for 2 times. And in last IETF meeting, it inspired a lot of good discussion. So thank you, Jason, Blush, Rob, and Kent for your valuable comments. And also, there was a lot of discussion on the mailing list. It's more than 14 number of messages. And about 1 month ago, a 2-hour NetMod intro meeting was held on this work. It's about 15 participants, and I believe that we have reached a lot of agreement with the objectives, scope, and solution on this work. So a new draft has been proposed to document the outcome in the intro meeting. So the authors tried to rewrite the previous NetConf with system draft and resubmitted as a NetMod individual draft based on chair's suggestion. So so regarding the motivation and goal, there are 4 points which are actually aligned with the objectives discussed in the intro meeting, if you can still remember that. The visibility means that we want to enable a server to better document the system configuration, and convenient because it is often the cases that the clients want to reference a system configuration which is not visible in running, and we want to avoid, at least reduce, having to copy the entire contents of system configuration into running when possible. Configurable is capability of being configured. There may be a desire for clients to configure descendant nodes of system-defined configuration. And last one is the client control. We want the client to have control over the configuration, which means a readback of running should contain only what was explicitly set by the clients. And it was discussed during the intro meeting, the complete solutions consists of 2 parts. There is a mandatory with system parameter, which is used to retrieve running and system configuration combined. Currently, this parameter is defined as an empty type, but we can discuss whether enumerated values are needed, for example, to control whether to return all the system configuration or only system configuration which are referenced. And both netconf get and getConfig operation and the restconf get and head methods are updated to support this parameter. And the second part is that we can also have an option system data store, which is read-only for clients, but its content may change dynamically. And our intention is to have no impact to operational, that is to say those present in operational with origin equals system will still be as always. This work doesn't change that behavior. And system defines those are non-deletable, but we do have some system configuration which are modifiable. A client could define a new value in running, which will override that in system. And it may also be possible for a client to configure a descendant node of system-defined list entry, and the merged results will flow into intended. So system may be overwritten or extended by running to create intended. So here gives a simple example of configuring a descendant node of a system-defined node. In this example, suppose system provides a loopback interface configuration with a name and 2 IP addresses. And step 1 and step 2 show that what the configuration looks like in system and operational respectively. And in step 3, the client tries to configure a description node, which is a descendant node of system-defined interface list node. And after that, the configuration of loopback 0 shown in operational includes the name, description, and 2 IP addresses. And the origin value of those explicitly configured in running is intended. Otherwise, it equals system. I saw Jason in the queue. So would like to say something about this?
Go ahead, Jason. Jason? Jufan, I think you should just continue. Jason might be having issues with his microphone.
Yeah, okay. So
Can you hear me now?
yeah, I can hear you.
Can you hear me? My apologies. I unmuted my own mic, but not unmute echo. Are you guys hearing me?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess my question was about step 4, and maybe this is still a point we're debating in the draft, but would the origin there not be running instead of intended?
I believe that there is no running a value named running in origin. It's only intended, which means flow from running data store.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
I might be misremembering the NMDA origin then. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So there are some open issues. Some of them may have already been discussed during the interim, and others may not. First, there is a very fundamental question whether we want running always be valid. I know that both 7950 and 8342 define that running must always be a valid configuration data tree. And I also know that there may be a concern that if we allow running to be invalid, then comes the issue of backward compatibility. The offline validation for legacy client will break unless all the reference system configuration is copied into running. But there is also another view that if we allow the reference system object not in running for online validation, the server can just accept the system configuration that the validation passes. And for offline validation, there are three ways. First one is that the client can offline merge running into system, but it necessitates client to be able to access system data store. It's easily achieved for NMDI clients, but no solution for non-NMDI clients. The second way is that clients explicitly copy and paste the reference system configuration into running. And we know that copy and paste must already be done when configuring Descendant nodes. As I mentioned before, the client wants to configure a description node for a loopback. The interface list node with a key name is needed to copy and paste. But the question is, must it be done for the reference too? And the last way is that the clients use a with system parameter to get a merged view and then validate against that merged view. But it's debatable that if it's a really offline validation because the server must be online to respond that request. And there are other open issues, something like, should we define an immutable flag which is used to indicate to the clients which system configuration is read-only or which is not? The server will return an error if the clients attempt to configure a value for a read-only system configuration. But what if configuring one with the same value as found in system? It's more like a copy and paste in this case, but should we allow it? And whether it's sufficient for this immutable flag to be carried only when the clients retrieve running with system parameter. The next issue is that should the with origin parameter be supported for intended? The server must remember whether a specific data node in intended comes from system or running. But my question is, should we expose this origin information to the clients? And should the origin ecosystem be required for system configuration copied and pasted into running? Currently, it's more like an explicit with default basic mode. Any default data nodes explicitly set by a client will no longer be treated as a default data even with a same value. But with origin equal to intended seems more like an override rather than copy and paste. Yeah, go ahead, Jason, please.
Hi, guys. Just making sure you're hearing me again. Hello?
Jason, you'll see that the mic goes up and down. You should
Okay.
just don't wait for acknowledgement, please.
Okay. So the for the last bullet here, I'd propose that if if like an interface has been defined purely by system, then the origin should say system. But if the user or client has explicitly declared that interface in the running config, then I think that should be reflected as a different origin somehow. So either intended or some other, whatever the same origin is for explicitly defined config, to show that that's been kind of, explicitly entered into the running configuration. And because we're kind of taking the stance that overrides and takes precedence over the system configuration. And that my second comment, which is kind of related to the origin, is I mentioned, I guess I asked earlier in the example whether the origin should be shown as intended. I checked NMDA, and you're right, it doesn't seem to be a running, but there's going to be a little bit of confusion, I think, because system merges into intended. So when we give an origin of intended, it could be a little ambiguous as to whether that actually came from system or from running. I mean, I know we have an origin of system, but anyway, we may want to have some more discussion about those origins.
Hi, this is Kent as a contributor. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah,
So,
you can go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to respond to Jason's comment, actually both comments. So the for the origin equals system, when copy pasted into running, I think the idea is that all the ancestor nodes, or really everything that got copied, would initially have the origin equals system. But then if descendant nodes were being configured, then those would be the ones that would have the origin equals intended. And then, but then to your second point, and actually the middle bullet point on this slide, I think the intention there is whether or not this work should introduce to the intended data store, like with the operational data store, an ability to, when you get the configuration from intended, you could actually specify a with origin parameter that would then annotate those values so that even when you're getting from intended, it would be visible as to whether or not those values came from system or from running. Currently, of course, that's not the NMDA didn't allow for that. It only allowed for the with origin to the operational data store. That's all.
Yeah, the server must remember whether a data node intended it comes from system or from running, so that it can make sure that it will have no impact to operational. Those will previously present in operational with origin ecosystem will still ecosystem, so that. But this question is, should we define this origin information to the clients so that it can retrieve from intended?
Balash, you're next in queue.
So to the third bullet, for us, a very common use case is that people do a show all configuration, store it somewhere, and then replace the full configuration back. Now, in such case, you need the origin equals system marking to be able to say that, yes, but the origin marked nodes, we don't have to push back. If we would lose that because it's not there anymore, then we try to override them, and that leads to problems. So yes, for the third bullet, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Jason.
I guess responding both to Kent and to Balash. So Balash, if someone does a read back from intended or operational, and they have not explicitly declared system configuration in the running, then it would report those system configuration items as origin system. I'm only advocating that if an operator explicitly declares system configuration themselves in the running, that it should be considered with an origin the same as any other config that the client does in running. I think it would be odd that you could read the running, see certain statements in there, then you read operational, and some of the statements from running have a different origin than other statements in running. So I'm still of the opinion that anything you kind of anything you declare in running that overrides system, in my opinion, that is considered just like any other client config, and should be reported as that origin. When a client declares something in the running in order to make offline validation work, they don't have to copy the entire object and all its descendant leafs. They just have to copy basically the list entry and its key to resolve the leaf ref to make it valid. All the rest of the descendant nodes in that object, for example, that interface, could stay declared by system. They don't have to be copied into running.
Go ahead, Jan.
Thank you. Yeah, my main concern here is that we are redefining 7950 and 8342 and in a sort of highly incompatible way, and I'm not very favorable with that. But I agree very much with the intents of this work. I think system config is important and we can do things there. But maybe we should try to reverse the flags, like with system should maybe perhaps be without system instead, so that if you don't specify any flag, everything works as normal. And then if your client is capable of seeing things that are, well, sort of leaf refs pointing to things that don't exist in running, then you specify this without system, and then you can deal with that. So I just want everything to work as normal as long as you don't specify anything special.
Contributor. So first, I think actually the with system gives you the normal behavior by default, but we should double check that. To Jason's point, the comment or the in parentheses at the bottom of that previous slide, it said much like the default flag in the with defaults RFC, in the sense that for those servers that had the explicit mode, the default flag is there so that the server can know for sure that like the client was configuring back into running the default value. If the client negated or neglected to specify the default annotation, then the server would say, oh, even though this value is the same value as the default, the server is explicitly configuring it. So that exact same behavior, I think, is what we'd want to carry over into this system idea. For those,
yes, but
maybe we need to have something like system modes. If there's with default modes, maybe there's like with system modes, and so the server can advertise its behavior in that regard. And then, sorry, my second point is that actually I think the first open issue, which is on screen now, is probably the more important one to be focusing on, is the extent of backwards compatibility. Right now, I think this work is teetering on needing something like Yang Next or netconf next, RESTconf next, and or if we could structure it in one way that it doesn't, because it could be the case that a legacy client, a client that's not aware of the ability to process system information, will be suddenly very surprised if it does a get on running and some extra annotations appear. Such as the origin equals system by default, they may not know how to process that. So I guess we just have to work through that detail.
Yeah, and we really have to take more discussion, at least on this, to the list. If you could wrap up your presentation so that we have time for the next slot, please.
Yeah, there is, I believe we have already discussed the issues all, and I have already wrapped up. I'm happy to shift the issues to the list. Yeah.
Yes, please. Really good discussion. I'd like to continue. If we get enough intensity and interest, we can always hold another interim. And with that, moving on.
Okay, thank you.
Oscar, can you, there you go.
Let me see. Share.
Yeah, looks good. Thank you. Continue.
Oh, okay. I hope that you can hear me good. So thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to present this this work on the extensions of the ACLs. Okay, so here we are on behalf of my co-authors, also from Telefonica and from Orange. So the idea of the motivation of this draft is that we took as a starting point the ACL Young model that is defined in NETMOD, precisely in 8519. And that Young model targets the configuration of the forwarding behavior in a device. Okay, so you can create these filters. Okay, so this model, you can create the entries, so these ACAs, the matches, and the actions. Okay, so to that point, everything so good so far. We have been doing some work internally in both in Telefonica and Orange, compiling the operational experiences of the use of the ACLs in live deployments, and trying to see if we can do everything using this Young model. And we have documented here in the draft that we are presenting a set of improvements that we think are necessary to the ACL model. Okay, and what we would like today, as we'll see at the end, is to discuss with you the approach of doing those extensions. So the current Young module defined in RFC 8519 is already prepared to have some augmentations. Okay, so it's been prepared to be extended. However, because of its design, there are a set of limitations that it makes it complicated to do all the improvements via augmentation. Okay, so in order to do some of the improvements, we will need to do some redefinition of some things. So here is the list of the functional this enhancement and functional gaps, and classified by what is the problematic that we have found, and they are documented in the draft. So on the one hand, some that leads to some suboptimal configuration. So one of them is the lack of manipulating a list of prefixes. Okay, so typically you need to you can only do one prefix at a time in one entry. Okay, so you will have to duplicate many entries to create that. For manageability, also you cannot create or define aliases or sets. For example, as we will see, prefix is a very common functionality that we require. And then functional-wise, we lack the handling fragments of IPv4, so we can discard, for example, fragments. Okay. Also, the handling of TCP flags is suboptimal. For example, it does not support all the matching as, for example, it is supported in BGP flow spec. Okay, so we'll see that we could, for example, do some mask to be able to filter several the flags. Also, in the actions, and right now you can accept and discard, or either silently or not. But for example, you could also have rate limited actions. Also, you could perform payload-based filtering. Also, separately decoupled from this functionality of the model, the current model is a device model. Okay, so it's intended that you have a device that has that you program there the ACL, but we can also use it at a network level, okay, to manage the ACLs in a network. For example, if you want to configure the perimeter security of the network, and you manage all the filters in a central way. So then you would require also to extend the model to be able to use it in a network, and maybe bind say which ACL applies to a device. Okay, And also you could be able to reuse the ACL and the content of the ACL, for example, as a template, or the sets across several devices. For example, the prefix list that you define is a prefix list you can use in multiple devices, and you can define it once at network level and being able to apply it in several devices. Okay, so we'll go with each of the problems. So the first one that we mentioned is not that we currently don't have a possibility to work with list of prefixes. Okay, so now you can only say which is the destination IPv4 or the destination IPv6 or the source IPv4 or IPv6. However, when we want to, for example, mitigate DDoS attacks, we need to provide a big list of addresses. And even if we want to do the combination of sources and destinations, even it makes worse. The problem multiplies. Okay, so then if we want to create those rules today, we would require n multiplied by m entries. Okay, so instead of creating a single entry. Okay, so this is how with the old one, just to create the destination and source into separate entries, and you could combine them in a single one just by allowing changing this to allow a list. Also, how we've seen that operators work is typically the network operators maintain a prefix list, okay, to use in ACLs. Okay, and also it is very common that the department that is manipulating this prefix list is a separate department. So it's typically a security department, or in the case of business customer, even it can be the part of the business department that maintains their own list of ACL. So typically there are people like to maintain one list, okay, with some naming and all the addresses there, so that the management is separate. Okay, so we think it's good to be able to have those lists. Okay, so for example, the routing policies already have the notion of sets, and in particular the prefix sets. In that case, it's prefix range sets. Even they call it prefix sets. Okay. So, and also we can generalize this concept also to have aliases or defined sets. Okay, so we can have these reusable definitions that you can use across multiple ACLs, and you can have, for example, these prefix sets or prefix list where you have all these IPv4 or IPv6 prefixes, the protocol sets or port number sets. You define that in the set of ports to reuse, or even ICMP sets where you can filter the type or the code, and you can have them already predefined and reuse them. Also, another thing that mentioned is the handling of flags. So even the ACL is applied locally, is typical and sometimes is triggered by other tools. For example, the BGP flow, as mentioned before, is one of the possibilities. And we cannot easily map all the filtering rules, and in particular, one of the things that we cannot do is correctly handle all the TCP flags. In the current draft, you can have select one flag today, or one bit of the TCP flag, but you, for example, cannot create a mask to match of the several TCP flags. Okay, so what I wanted to ask the working group today is several questions. First of all, I mean, we are willing to work on the extensions necessary to fill these gaps, but we need some guidance from the working group, especially that the starting point is an existing RFC. Okay, so what are so we want to ask the working group what is the best suggestion to approach the engagement. So either we have a new version of the ACL model, so it's version whatever, or an RFCBs, or whatever way we can minimize the non-backwards compatible changes. There will be some some changes that break existing structure, but minimizing them. Either we could augment the existing young module, not touch everything that is there, but only if we need to add things, we add everything on top. In some cases, it will mean having to structure a little bit similar, but with more capabilities. And also, for sure, open to any question, open to opinions here. And also the differentiation between the network model and the device model is, okay, do we create a separate module for the network module? Because we might need one like that is extending, for example, the IETF network, and then we plug there the sets and the ACL templates on top of it. And if we go for that, having a separate module for the network-wide module of ACLs and sets, is that module to be work also here in NetMod or everywhere? So here, any feedback on this is appreciated. So thank you.
So Jason's in queue.
Yeah, I guess just about how to approach the work. It might need more discussion on the mailing list to see how the scope of the work evolves and how much functionality is being added and how backwards compatible it is. But you might, my initial gut is that it would probably be a separate RFC that augments, you know, with extended extra functionality. Just as a first cut from what I'm seeing from this. About the network versus device model, I guess I had a question. When you say device, like a net, so there's per interface ACLs, and then you have this kind of device or network ACL. Is the intention that that's an ACL that is effectively applied to traffic coming in on any interface? It's just kind of like.
No, regarding the second question of the network, no, the idea is to be able to manage ACLs that or sets or prefix lists that are used in several devices. Okay, so that you can have, for example, a template, an ACL template, and that ACL template, if you want to replicate it in several devices, okay, from for example, from a controller, that you can reuse it easily. So it's something to facilitate the management of ACLs and prefix lists from a central location. For example, especially for the prefix list, taking into account that if you define in the operator, you define some deny list for some service, this is independent on the device that you are running it. So you will define it once, and then you will say, okay, this applies in this device, and this device, okay? From a control perspective, then you will download the specific configuration to the device. But the network model is, when I refer to network, is that applies to several devices, okay? That was and to be able to help in managing several devices at the same time.
Okay, looks like Jason doesn't have anything more there. So in general, it's a judgment call of whether you augment or revise, right? And you really have to get into some of the details to figure that out. And then when we start getting into the details, we'll also figure out what the details are of device relative to network. And if there's an existing model you're augmenting, all of those, getting to those details will help you answer the questions on your slide. Right now, you just have, you know, an empty section, so it's a little hard to evaluate or give you a definitive answer. But, you know, as a general rule, if you can, it's a judgment call, but if you can augment and you're adding optional capability, augment is the way to, as a separate RFC, is definitely the way to go. If you are looking for revising the core behavior that everyone needs to adhere to, then you definitely want to revise, you know, do a BIS or a replacement model. So I think we need to get to the details. And the motivation that you've given here is just right for the presentation. I think for the draft, rather than focus on motivation, focus on what you're actually going to do. So focus on the new capabilities you're defining in the draft, describe them, and then throw out some proposals, some details, and then we can really jump into asking this question. So, you know, from I don't think, you know, we haven't heard anyone jump in and say, you know, this is completely wrong. Head down. What we've heard is you know, looking at you know, the best way to do it. But again, having details will help us understand, help the working group judge whether it's something that they want to A, support, and B, what's the best mechanism to implement it.
Okay, so we can update the draft with a we can go in the we can propose in the draft that if you want the two directions. Okay, one that implies breaking a little bit what was there, and the one that would augment. So in some cases we have found that we need to break a little bit what was there. Okay, so but in any case we can do that. We can prepare a new version of the draft with some of these details, and then have the conversation to decide. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Jason's in queue. We're a little over time, but Jason, you can have the last word.
Just a really quick question. Is any of the functionality you're proposing here mean stateful firewall behavior? Or is it all stateless?
So far, it's all stateless. We were not considering it stateful so far. So it's all rules. No, follow the same approach. It's only enhancements over what was there.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation. Look forward to seeing the next revision as well as future discussion on the list. With that, we're actually out of time, and thank you all for participating in this meeting. Look forward to possibly seeing some people in person the next meeting. There's, you know, rumors that might be hybrid. So thank you all for contributing.
Guys.